Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Path of Exile Skills. Today we're going to be talking about one that I actually made a character on, and I had a lot of fun with this character. I called him the Dukes of Hazards, and the reason is because these are, of course, hazard skills. This one in particular that I'm going to be talking about is called Spearfield. Spearfield's pretty amazing. So the way that Spearfield works is you stab it into the ground, and when you stab it into the ground, you get the beautiful Spearfield effect here, putting all the spears coming out. Another interesting note is that the Spearfield spears take the appearance of what your spear looks like. So no matter what spear you use, even if it's a unique spear, the spears that come out of the ground are essentially the same as your spears, which is really cool. Just a small little note. Now, Spearfield does some pretty good damage. It's actually not a bad skill at all when it comes to damage output. You stab the ground, causing multiple spears to burst out of the ground in front of you in a large area, and the spears remain for a duration or explode when enemies touch them, damaging and maiming them. Creates one spear per 0.2 meters of radius. This is very specific, so the higher the radius of the ability is, the more spears that it technically creates per cast, so you can actually increase the number of spears per cast by increasing the radius, which is interesting. 80% less damage if destroyed within 0.5 seconds by something other than you, so you actually kind of want them to stay on the ground for a little bit before they explode. Spears emerge within 7.3 meters. Length cone. Spear duration is 10 seconds, and maximum active spears is 70, so there is a limit to the total number of spears that you can have active. Hazards created by this skill have a 13% chance to rearm after they are triggered. This means that if a monster hits them and they explode, then they can just simply re-trigger, and there's a lot of percentage re-trigger that you can potentially get to make the ability re-trigger more often. So if you look at my current re-trigger, I have a rearming chance of 33% at the moment, which is pretty interesting. It is an AoE melee sustained duration hazard skill. It has a hazard tag specifically. And then, of course, there's the explosion. The explosion maims on hit, which maim causes monsters to move 30% slower and reduces their evasion. It also has an additional 10% maim slow from this skill. And the explosion radius is only 0.6 meters, which isn't like the biggest explosion radius. And let's pull up Advanced Thaumaturgy. And let's look at Spearfield on Advanced Thaumaturgy. And as you can see, it has 20% more attack speed, which isn't really the greatest as far as Spearfield is concerned, although it will let you deploy your traps faster, I suppose. Spamming it isn't really a good thing to do. You really kind of want to put down your 70 and let them do their magic. But if you do want to deploy them more quickly and make sure you have all 70 on the battlefield at any given time, it can be helpful to have more attack speed to make sure that you're applying them quicker. Then we have the explosion. So the explosion is the interesting part of the ability and how it does most of its damage, which is 255% attack damage, as you can see, and this explosion has the radius of 0.6 meters, right? Well, mine has a slightly larger radius, which I think is right here. So I'm at 0.8 meters, and I can get some pretty interesting damage out of this ability as far as the explosions and the Spearfield goes. I don't know if this character is still set up properly. I believe I'm still set up properly. I have to go test him out and see if he actually still functions like he's supposed to, but you know, we'll see. The other thing is I want to show you on the tree the hazard ability passives that you can potentially get for this skill, right? So there's a lot of hazard abilities that will give you increased hazard damage, and these are things like enemies affected by your hazards have 25% reduced armor. Enemies affected by your hazards have 25% reduced evasion. You can get hazard damage bonuses here. You can also have 5% chance to rearm after triggered. There's also another section over here that gives you 10% increased damage for each hazard triggered recently, up to 50%. You can also grab the hazards have a 15% chance to rearm right there, and more hazard damage nodes, and of course there's even hazard duration if you want to stack that. Hazard stuff is really kind of interesting because you can get a rather large amount of hazard bonuses, like the widespread coverage, which gives you increased attack speed with spears, hazard effect, area of effect, reduced hazard, Damage, increased duration of ignite and chill. That one actually reduces the damage. Oh, I like that one. I don't like that one. That one reduces my damage. That's just not what I want. You can also grab the delayed danger, which increases your hazard damage and increases the hazard duration. You can grab this one, which debuffs inflicted by hazards have a 30% increased slow magnitude and 30% increased hazard immobilization buildup. There's a bunch of nodes all over the place for hazards. It's definitely something that you can look into as far as your character goes. Now, whether or not you want to build full into Spearfield or whether you want to use it as a support ability is completely up to you. It works really well for either, to be perfectly honest. Let's just go into a random map here. It really doesn't matter. And I'm going to show off how Spearfield works. It's been so long since I played this character that I can't be sure that this character actually is viable for tier 15, but let's just go ahead and pop into a map anyway and see how this particular functions, right? So here we are just firing off our Spearfields. So we have a ton of Spearfields. The Spearfields are hitting targets as they move, and actually moving targets is really good. So one of the things that you actually don't want with Spearfields is you actually kind of don't want immobilizations. Immobilizations stop the targets from moving, and if you stop the targets from moving, they won't hit multiple of your Spearfields, which is something that's definitely bad. Another thing that you can potentially utilize is reverse knockback, which I think I was actually utilizing on this character. Empire's Grasp, Titan Grips, which reduces knockback direction. This allows me to essentially pull a target through the spears, allowing me to get the target to hit multiple spears at that particular time. Right. So if I'm dealing with a target that is not moving, I can pull the target, as you can see, into the spears, causing them to take additional damage by essentially sucking them through the Spearfield, which is pretty cool. Spearfield does have some negative side effects, essentially, though. Let's talk about some of the negative side effects of Spearfield. So number one, it requires ground. It is a ground-based ability. Some ground-based abilities don't work very well against certain bosses. The bosses that are, for instance, not on the ground. Like the skeleton that's in the middle of that circle, that he's not actually on the ground. He's kind of like in his own little area. The Titan, which is off the map. There's a couple bosses that it just doesn't really work the best against in terms of the fact that they're not on the ground, and so they don't get hit by the ground-based effects, right? But as you can see, we're clearly able to kill things with the ability. It does decent damage. In this particular case, I believe I'm focused on physical. Is it physical damage, or am I focused on lightning? I think it's mainly lightning with this particular setup is what I'm currently running. What was it? Lightning, physical, increase. Yeah, and it's not exactly the best weapon for this particular build, but whatever. It's an interesting weapon for sure. I would probably focus it more to a specific element if I was to build this now. Probably not cold, because cold freezes the targets, and I don't want the targets frozen. But lightning would be a good choice. Fire might even be a good choice. I think lightning is probably your best bet with Spearfield, just simply because you don't want the targets to stop moving, and you'd probably also like them to take additional damage from your attacks, right? Now, Spearfield doesn't have to be used specifically for damage output, right? You can also use it for other things. You can use it for armor break, or you can even use it for generating charges. To give you an example, let me pull up my Javazon character. This is a character that I specifically developed for frenzy charges, and I wanted a really good way to generate as many frenzy charges as I could without having to really worry about where they came from. So one of the ways that I did this was utilizing armor break. So by armor breaking targets, you have a chance to gain an endurance charge every single time you armor break. This endurance charge can be converted into a frenzy charge via the resonance passive, which allows you to turn your endurance charges into frenzy charges instead. And as you can see, I can utilize Spearfield in this way to break armor of a large number of monsters to get a large number of frenzy charges as well. So when you think about Spearfield, are we thinking about Spearfield as a standalone ability? Are we thinking about Spearfield as a support ability? What exactly are you trying to get out of it? Because honestly, Spearfield is really good for a lot of different builds. You can utilize it to get yourself armor break. It works really good for armor breaking. I would highly recommend it for armor break. Not only does it work well to break armor, but it also works well to break armor in mass over a large number of monsters, right? So it's a very easy ability that you can plop down, and the monsters will get their armor broken relatively effectively. You can also potentially use it to pull armor break in mass if that's what you'd like to do, if you have another way that you're breaking armor. And in my particular case, I'm using it for armor break with the 20% chance to gain endurance charges, specifically for my frenzy charges, which is really good. It works really good to maim targets. Obviously, it has pretty good maiming effect, which slows down the targets. It also works very well just simply to add additional damage into a build. Just simply because you can plop it down at any points, right? And it just sits there, which means that any monster that runs into it is going to take damage or get an effect that you're looking to give off with Spearfield, right? You can also potentially use it for freezing if you'd like to, if you're running a cold build, since the damage type of the ability is really dependent on what it is that you're using, right? So what weapon you're using with the ability and how you set it up is going to be more specifically how the ability functions, right? So my ability right now, see, I got physical stun build up. It actually does stun very well. We've also got the maim. I'm also building pinning with this particular ability. I've got rage on hit, which is, it's really good for building rage on hit, by the way, because it hits so many targets so quickly, and it also counts as a physical damage ability. If you want to use it as your rage builder, I would highly recommend that. Like, for instance, when you get into a pack, you'll notice that, like, I can pretty much build my rage to maximum almost instantaneously just by firing off a couple Spearfields within a group. Not only does it work very well for building rage, but it also works very well for keeping that rage capped all the time, because obviously your spears will remain on the battlefield, and anytime anybody hits those spears, they will, of course, generate more rage for you, which is pretty ridiculous. So like right now, I currently have, you know, like 70 spears on the battlefield, and every single time one of those spears explodes, I'm getting rage from it, which is just keeping me capped all the time. Armor Explosion is also really good. So Armor Explosion is an ability that works when you break armor. So if you're using it for breaking armor, you can easily add in Armor Explosion to do a pretty massive amount of damage every single time you're breaking armor, which is really nice. And then you could potentially have something else pulling that armor break, which is also pretty useful. As a hazard, and if you're stacking hazard bonuses, there are other hazards in the game that you could potentially use. There's a new Calguran one that electrocutes targets, which I probably wouldn't use with Spearfield specifically because it stops targets from moving. There is also Caltrops. Caltrops are abilities that you can, like, lay down. Usually with, I thought I had Caltrops on, no, it's on the other character. Caltrops scale with hazard bonuses, which is actually really good. They're basically just these little tiny explosives that people run over, and they damage them individually, right? So when you think about Spearfield, one of the things you have to remember is that Spearfield is not just like a damage ability. It's a very effective screen-wide damage ability that you can utilize for either damage, support, or even charge generation. Keeping that in mind, you start to realize that Spearfield is actually a really good addition to maybe just about any build. If you're using a spear, why not have Spearfield on there at some point just for some specific support purpose? Even if you're not using a spear, Spearfield can still be extremely effective in specific situations because you're just getting a massive amount of utility out of it, right? And of course, once you start getting into some of the hazard abilities, which allow you to rearm it, so you get more rearms, or you start utilizing the armor break or the armor explosion, or you start building rage with it, or maiming, or debilitating, and various other things that you can do with Spearfield, you start to realize it's a crazy ability. If you haven't used Spearfield, my honest suggestion to you would be to try working it into one of your builds. It's worth it. I feel like even if you just use it as an incidental, like when you like, say when you leap into a pack or something, right? And you leap into the pack, like, it's very easy to just pop down a Spearfield and let it do its magic while you fight, right? It's not like an ability that you have to continuously use over and over again. It's an ability that you can cast like 2 times and cover the majority of the battlefield, and then you can just let it work its magic while you're attacking with whatever your other main ability is, which is surprisingly effective. And when it rearms itself automatically, that makes it even more automated, which is actually really good as well. Because a lot of the times when you're making a character, you've got like a main ability, you've got a like sub ability, and then everything else, like you really kind of want it to be automated because you don't want to have to be pressing, like 100 buttons like you're playing a piano. Spearfield definitely supports those builds where it doesn't function as an ability that has to be clicked all of the time. It just needs to be pressed like once or twice at the beginning or like in the middle of a combat, just so that you have the spears on the battlefield. And as you move around, like even as the spears are destroyed by monsters, you can move around in the spears and draw them toward the larger concentrations of spears that are still active. So you can tactically use the spears on the battlefield that you need. The reverse knockback works really well with this particular setup. I don't have it on this one, but the reverse knockback allows you to pull the monsters through them. In general, like even bosses, I found that like charge at you or have movement abilities, they can hit every single spear on the way to you. And you would be surprised how much damage you can do when a monster like rushes through this. When they literally start like where she is, and they go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way to you, and they get hit like by 30 of the spears in quick succession. Their HP absolutely melts. It's beautiful. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.